Stephanie Bianco, and this nonprofit spotlight moment is brought to you by Donorbox. I am honored to introduce you to Lane Himmelman, Chief Development Officer with Habitat for Humanity of Greater Sacramento. Lane, welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you. To bring this close to home for the people viewing today, how has Habitat for Humanity of Greater Sacramento changed since you have been involved?
Sure. So, gosh, I have been on the team with Habitat for Humanity of Greater Sacramento almost 11 years. I started in the fall of 2010, very kind of different role than I am now. I actually started as a fund development assistant, or as I like to sometimes say, it was a glorified receptionist position at the time. Just straight out of college, wanted to do something that felt impactful. I also had graduated in the middle of the recession with an English degree, and I did not know what I was going to do with that. And it was very challenging to find a job, and Habitat was hiring. And the first choice candidate didn't call them back, and so I got the job. And kind of funny, but when I started, I just absolutely fell in love with the organization. I didn't even know that we had a local Habitat for Humanity in the Sacramento area where I grew up. I thought it was just something that happened overseas and other places and bigger cities in the US. And so I just loved seeing the way that Habitat brought people together of so many different backgrounds to help change lives through housing. And I can't say that I was particularly connected with affordable housing at the time, but through my experience with Habitat, I've just become so much more aware of the integral role that housing plays in your health and the ability to break generational poverty and to build equity and to have a decent education and a place to study, and just so many foundational pieces of being able to build a better life for yourself. And so when I started at Habitat and I started meeting the families and seeing the impact that these homes make, I started looking for ways that I could use that English degree and to just create more value for the organization that I saw doing these amazing things. And started got us up on Facebook, which was, the big thing at the time, and redesigned our website and started interviewing our homeowners and getting what I call the essential stories, so that we would be better able to share these amazing stories and the impact of these homes with our kind of greater community at large. And, when I started with Habitat, we were serving maybe a couple dozen individuals a year through new home builds. And about 5 years ago, I would say, we really jump-started some programs to continue to build and provide home ownership opportunities to low-income families, which is so important, but also starting to look at, okay, we're building in these low-income neighborhoods because a part of our mission is not only to provide affordable housing, but to also revitalize underserved communities. But if we're building one new home and 5 are falling down around it, and we've seen huge spikes in senior homelessness, particularly in Sacramento, how can we ensure that people that, maybe 20, 30 years ago were able to afford to buy a home in these neighborhoods, that they're not becoming displaced as gentrification runs rampant in some of these lower income underserved neighborhoods. So with that, we jump started a home repairs program devoted to critical health and safety repairs for low income homeowners, primarily seniors and veterans, and also started to do some community projects to really touch the entire community where we're building and repairing homes. And so with that, we, we'll plant community gardens, we do amenity upgrades to community centers, to local schools in underserved neighborhoods, helping to revitalize local parks. And, with kind of those new programs, we've gone from an organization that serves a couple, dozen individuals a year to an organization that's serving between 3,000 to 3,500 individuals a year. And so it's been an incredible kind of growth trajectory that we've been on. We have not really added much staff, so it's been you just kind of learn as you're in the nonprofit world how to juggle more balls and how to bring more people into the work that you do. We're very blessed that we have around 2,000 volunteers a year that support our tiny team of 28 staff members.
That's absolutely amazing. Though you be tiny, you be mighty.
Yes, and we always say it's, we are a tiny team, but it is the community around us and our Habitat family of volunteers and donors and supporters which make us mighty.
You touched upon this, Lane, on how when people think of Habitat for Humanity, they immediately just think of homes. But as you touched upon this, it is so much more. Can you elaborate a little bit on what Habitat does and more of maybe a story of what the people actually that you help?
Sure. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we do, new home ownership opportunities for low income families. And that's, been something Habitat for Humanity of Greater Sacramento has been doing for the past 35 years, where it's a hand up, not a handout. They are low income families who are working often 2 or 3 minimum wage jobs just to put food on the table, clothes on their kids' backs. And it's not a giveaway. These families put in, once they go through a very rigorous qualification process. And I will share, we just opened up home ownership applications last month for 10 homes. And we had over 5,500 families apply for 10 homes, which is, I think, just yet another example of the need. Especially, it's something that's nationwide. It's not exclusive to Sacramento, but Sacramento does have rents rising at double the national average right now, and it's one of the least affordable cities for homeownership in the entire country. So these families, after they go through a very rigorous qualification process, they put in 500 hours of sweat equity building their home alongside volunteers, and then they purchase it for a 30-year 0% interest equivalent mortgage. And one thing I'll share on that before I share about our other two kind of programs is, these families work really hard. Is a story of Rena Dixon. She was a single mom. Her husband was killed a few years prior to her applying to Habitat. And, she became a single mom overnight with 3 children and was working full time as a receptionist in a medical office. And even so, couldn't afford a decent apartment here in Sacramento. And so they ended up moving into government housing, she and her 3 children. And she said there were drug deals in the complex and shootings. And she just felt so unsafe and just awful as a mother that that's all she could provide for her kids, even working 5 days a week. And then one day someone broke into their rental and stole all of their valuables, took their TV, everything she had. And she said, I got to move my kids out of this situation. And so she ended up moving into the only thing they could afford at the time, which was a 200 square foot unfinished garage. And, we did her interview in that garage. And let me tell you, it was, no air conditioning, no heat, concrete floor, just a big bed where she and her 3 children were sleeping. And, super unbelievably hot in the winter or in the summer, very cold in the winter. Well, she qualified for our program. She had to put in all 500 hours of sweat equity herself, building her home because her children were young. And on the first day out of sweat equity, she shared this story at her dedication when she was, holding the keys to her house. She'd finished her sweat equity. She'd signed the mortgage papers. And she said, I was out there. It was 100-degree heat. We were digging the plumbing lines for the home for 8 hours. And I got in my car and I was sunburnt and filthy and my hands were calloused. It might have been bleeding a little bit. And I just started crying because I thought, oh my God, I have 492 more hours of this. I don't know if I can do this. But she said, then I got home, to my 200 square foot garage where I live with my 3 children. And I looked at their faces and, with all the strength that I have, I can do this. And now I'm a homeowner, something I never thought that I could be. I mean, we're serving families who maybe are one step away from being on the streets, one, paycheck away from that being their reality. And by moving them into affordable homeownership where they have an affordable mortgage and they can build wealth and equity for their family and provide other opportunities for their children that they would never have had if they had continued to live in that just survival mode, which is oftentimes what affordable rental can be. We did a big survey of our first 100 families that we moved into Habitat homes, and 76% reported an improvement in their children's grades, and 59% either had at least one family member go on to higher education. And of those families that were previously on food stamps, 0% remained on food stamps after moving into their Habitat home. And so it really just kind of shows that it's not just a roof, it's providing that springboard to other opportunities. And, in terms of our other programs, I know I shared a little bit about our home repair program. And that one is one which it's fairly recent. We started 5 years ago. The first year we did one, and now we average about 50 home repairs a year, and primarily for seniors and veterans. And two of the people that I got to see, one, her name was Sonia Noble. She's a widow. She's a senior, and we had done a roof repair for her. And she was sharing that we did a roof repair, and then through a partnership we have with our local utility provider, we were actually able to put solar on her home. And with the utility savings that she had, she said, well, not only was I living in fear that my roof was going to fall down and what was I going to do, but now I have a new roof where I feel healthy and safe, and I got solar. And now with my utility savings, I've actually been able to go to school, and she's going to be graduating next year as a rehabilitation counselor, with her degree. And then another man that I went and visited, his name was Miles Maria, and he's a Vietnam Air Force veteran. And we also repaired his roof. We put solar on through our partnership with our utility provider. And he had shared that his whole family had to move in with him, his son, his grandkids, during COVID, because his son had lost his job. And being able to have a safe home for them to live, and stay with him, and then have the solar, which he had shared had been a lifelong dream of his. And I asked him, if you could share like how, what this experience meant to you. And he got really quiet, and I thought, oh, okay, maybe he's not sure I feel. And then he just broke down and he said, how does someone feel when a miracle happens to them?
Given the climate, and you touched upon this with COVID over the past 2 years, what strategies do you have in place at Habitat for Humanity of Greater Sacramento that's going to propel you into the future?
Sure. Well, I guess I would take a step back and just say, COVID, like I think for every organization, it hit us like a ton of bricks, and kind of the ground just came out from under us. And, we, no one ever has a crisis plan for a global pandemic. I mean, maybe people do now, but they certainly didn't in March of 2020 when COVID hit. And for us, we, our funding comes from a variety of ways. So I'm the chief development officer. My department raises about $2.6 million in donations from individuals and companies. But we also have funding that comes from our Habitat homeowners who pay their mortgage payments. And then we also have funding that comes through our Restore, which is kind of like like I said, a Home Depot meets Goodwill type of thing. And our Restore brings in about, I would say, $1 million to $1.3 million through sales a year. And it primarily supports our general operating costs. So rent, keeping the lights on, staff salaries, while the 2.6 million or plus that the development department raises a lot of times is restricted to projects, because we want to make sure those donor dollars are going to support the work and our mission. Well, when the Restore in March, when we received shelter in place orders, we had to close the Restore, all of a sudden that meant all of that general operating funding just completely stopped. And we wanted to make sure that we reserved the general operating funding we had on hand to support our homeowner partners, because when they pay their mortgages, it's not just for their principal. We also impound for their property taxes, their homeowners insurance. And our homeowners, they're Uber drivers, they're working retail, they're the jobs that were cut. And so if God forbid, all of our homeowners lost their jobs, we wanted to make sure that we could protect them and ensure that they, weren't in a position where they felt like they couldn't pay their mortgage or stay in their home. So that was our first and foremost priority. And so what that meant was making a really challenging decision at the time to furlough 90% of our staff and temporarily shut down all of our active construction sites, which, our team, I've been on staff 11 years. Many of our construction site supervisors are going on 10, 15 years. They're people that have been, construction industry is booming right now, and they're amazingly talented human beings who have oftentimes been offered six-figure jobs to go and work for the for-profit construction industry, but they've stayed with our team because they believe in the mission and they see the impact every day. And so to have to, for our team to have to tell these incredible human beings, we have to furlough you. And for me, who's, built this incredible team on the development side, and, I was one of three people left on staff after the furloughs. And it was the CEO, myself, to try to raise funds so that we didn't have to shutter our doors after 35 years of, providing these opportunities for affordable homeownership, and also our controller to keep an eye on finances of how much time we had left. And so it was a really challenging time. I would say, like, I spent a lot of time at home and kind of crying to my partner. But then, we just dug in our heels and we said, we're going to figure this out. We are the only provider of affordable homeownership opportunities in the region that we serve. And if we don't exist, then that hope for these low income families to one day be able to have a home or to stay in their homes, for low income senior and veteran homeowners, that hope won't exist anymore. And so we, through some very creative, scrappy fundraising campaigns, we called one of it Home Together, and people held signs about why they were supporting Habitat and wanted us to be able to keep building. Many of our furloughed staff participated, and we had a matching donor that we got on board. We raised funds through that. We raised funds for PPP. We alerted our homeowner partners of what was happening. And I think one of the things that we were most shocked by was how the priority that our homeowners put on paying their mortgages to ensure that we had revenue to keep building for other families. Sorry, I don't know why I get emotional.
Well, I get emotional too. You're talking a domino effect. If one thing fails, it affects everybody else.
Yeah. And so it was just a beautiful time of it.
We came
Yeah,
through. Yes.
we did. Everybody kind of banded together. We were really blessed in that the furloughs only ended up lasting about 6 weeks before we were able to bring our team back, reopen the sites. And we had to change the way we did a lot of things. Even after we brought our team back and reopened the sites, we still couldn't bring out our usual army of volunteers. We usually engage about 2,000 volunteers a year. With COVID, we just weren't able to do that. And so we were able to bring out our crew leader volunteers, who are kind of a core group of about 30 or so retired folks who come out every week, and they stepped up big. Most of these people come out once a week. Many of them started coming out 3 times a week to make sure that we could still raise walls on projects. Their volunteers do 90% of the labor with our homeowner partners. And so we had a huge reduction in volunteer labor. We kind of figured that out. We couldn't host our big 400 person black tie gala in person. We usually have a women build where 400, 500 women come out in pink hard hats and take over the job sites, which raises, $100,000. We couldn't have that event. And so we looked for, how do we still continue to connect and engage and raise funds, because you can't do anything if you're not raising the money to build these homes. And so we transitioned our Women Build to a virtual event, which in theory, this is something which has no business being virtual. It's 400 women in pink hard hats hammering nails, but we had the lieutenant governor speak. We had our congresswoman speak. We had actually 55 unique speakers in this 1 hour event. And it showcased all of these women, from diverse backgrounds, ages, races, all about, why they believed we had to keep building and why they as women were coming together so Habitat could keep building. And the funds from our Women Build actually supported a project for a single mom, which had been put on pause because of COVID. And it helped fill the funding gap so that we could finish this home for this amazing single mom named Anna. She worked 2 full-time jobs, had 2 kids. And one of the neat things we did is anyone who donated to Women Build, there's kind of this tradition at Habitat when the volunteers are out on site where people take a Sharpie and they write their name and they write a message to the homeowner on the walls of the house. And the idea is that, it takes many hands and hearts to be able to build a Habitat home. And though, it gets covered over with the drywall, the legacy of the people that helped make the home possible continue to always live in the bones of the home. And so what we did with this virtual event is anyone that contributed, we wrote their name on the house. And Anna, the homeowner, usually the homeowner partners, they are building with all these thousands of people and they get to really see and feel the sense of the community that's making their home possible. And the families during COVID, they didn't have that. But I will tell you, when I walked Anna into her home and I said, Anna, see these names, every one of these people and these organizations, they're the ones that contributed to make your home possible. And she just, broke down into tears. And it was a real connection piece to the hands and hearts that make these homes possible. So the Women Build was awesome. It was something that we just kind of put together, figured out. And then with our virtual gala, that was we ended up raising $220,000 through the virtual gala event, and had a committee of amazing people that really helped kind of make it possible and throw it together. We had 2 months to plan it, which is nuts to plan a big scale event like that. But we just pushed through and we looked for creative ways to continue to connect people to the projects. We took our home dedications virtual, engaged all the sponsors with the gift giving ceremony and handing over the keys. And I will say I am very excited that we are now entering a much more traditional fiscal year. We've welcomed back community volunteers to our sites and our groups, and we're starting to plan an in-person gala and an in-person women build in March. But yeah, we made it through, and I think we learned ourselves that we can be creative and we can be innovative and we can be nimble.
Absolutely. Oh, Lane, amazing work, amazing dedication, and you are such an inspirational woman. I am so grateful for
Oh,
your time today, all the dedication that you've done, and you've helped so many realize their dreams and helping propel them into a better life. Thank you.
oh, thanks, Heidi. Well, I hope sharing our story, and it was a traumatic time, I think, but hopefully it isn't inspires others, and reminds them too that if they were going through a similar time, that they weren't alone.
Yes, agreed. Thank you. And again, a special thank you to Donorbox for sponsoring this inspirational moment. Donorbox believes helping you helps others, and we greatly appreciate your time.